Hey guys, I'm Dalton. I'm in the process of building out this van, and as I near completion of the build, I kind of wanted to go back to the beginning and walk you through the steps that I took to get here. I can share what I think I got right, what I think I got wrong, some tips and tricks, things I would do differently, and maybe just some funny clips here and there. So I hope you guys enjoy. So this video specifically is kind of going to be about what you do when you first get your van. In my case, I had to clean it, I had to remove rust, I had to paint over that rust. I kind of call that the prep work. And then I also included framing out sort of the upper half of the van in this video, which lays the foundation for the ceiling paneling and the wall paneling that you see right here. So like I said, my van itself is still not complete, but I'm getting there, and I hope you enjoy. Wait, I just said that. Don't enjoy, I guess. I don't know. So like I said, first thing I did was clean my van out with soap and water. This is essential, I think, if you're getting a used van, because you want a clean foundation to build everything upon. You don't want a bunch of dirt that could be covering rust, or there could be whatever, metal shavings or anything detrimental to the condition of the van on the floor and walls. So we want to make sure we clean that up. So step one is just get yourself a bucket of water, some soap, and get scrubbing. Clean everything out, vacuum it out, and that will lead us into step two. Step two, the prep work, is going to be getting rid of any rust. Fortunately, my van wasn't too bad. Some people will have more rust than others, depending on the condition of your van when you get it. For my van specifically, I just got a little wire attachment for my cordless drill, and I predominantly was able to use that to remove all of the rust in the van. If you need something more aggressive, you might want to go with a dedicated sander. Like I said, I use the cordless drill, but maybe a dedicated sander that's connected straight to an AC outlet could give you more power. Again, it'll totally depend on the severity of your rust. When you're sanding out or grinding off any of the old paint where there might be rust, make sure you have the right mask, because there can be lead in this paint, and obviously we don't want to be breathing in lead. After sanding down all of the rust, we're going to need to paint over that rust with, my personal preference is rust-oleum primer. You may not be able to sand out 100% of every tiny little rust speckle, so having that paint to cover anything that you can't quite get to with the sander or grinder is essential in my opinion. And once again, this is to lay a proper foundation for the rest of our van build. I don't know what happened to my painting footage. I had it in there somewhere originally. It seems to have disappeared, but you guys know what painting looks like. I got myself a little paintbrush and my can of paint, and I painted over all the rust. Nothing really to it. So after I finished my kind of prep work, I began putting on what's called sound deadening. So on the side, the walls of the van, I put some metal sheets. They're like metal adhesive sheets. And the idea behind them is that they absorb the vibrations from the large, thin pieces of metal that make up the walls of the van. If I were to do this again, I would probably skip the sound deadening step, as I felt like it didn't really make much of a difference. I also covered the wheel wells with some foam, and again, I don't think it really made much of a difference. The biggest things that made the difference for me were adding insulation and just the furniture in here. Once you build out a kitchen or a bench, or especially adding the mattress, you just have more objects in here to sort of absorb that sound, and you don't just have echoes bouncing around from metal wall to metal wall, and it is significantly different. So if it were up to me, if I were to do this again, I would skip the sound deadening step and save your money. The insulation and just the process of building out the van is going to deaden a lot of that auxiliary sound, in my opinion.
Alright, so today what I'm going to be working on, these joists right here are essentially going to be reinforced with wood, and I'm going to be able to run my my ceiling sort of lengthwise along the van here. So I need to cut 55-inch strips of 1/2-inch plywood, and that's what I've got, so let's get to it.
So before you do this step, it's kind of important to determine what you want your ceiling and walls to look like. I knew I was going to be running boards lengthwise along the van, so putting those furring strips of plywood across the van were essential for me because they were going to act like the joists that I could attach those cedar planks to. If you want to do something similar and run lengthwise planks, then you're going to probably want to add the furring strips just like I did here. If not, then you might want to do something a little bit different. But again, this is what I did. I just got a 1/2-inch plywood. I measured the distance across the van and it was approximately 55. I probably could have gotten away with 56 or even maybe 57 inches, but it's not super important to get it absolutely precise here, as this is all going to get covered up anyway. We just need enough wood to attach our ceiling panels to. So I ripped 55-inch pieces of plywood and attached them across all the joists in the van. That's what supports my ceiling planks that you can see right here.
Okay, so I made some marks for my pilot holes. I up a little bit, but these ones will be better.
After the 1/2-inch plywood furring strips that I put across the ceiling, I decided to add some 2x6s up into the top corners of the van. And those were kind of a dual purpose. Their intention is to support shelves, which you can see I haven't hung any shelves yet, but also to support these kind of corner planks going across here. So again, I just put the 2x6s. You cut them to size in between each of the support beams going across the ceiling of your van. If you have those, again, this is all on a Ram ProMaster for me, so your van may look a little bit different. But yeah, 2x6s, and before putting the 2x6s on there, I wanted to stuff my insulation in there. So if you're interested, I used Havelock wool. It's sheep's wool, essentially. You know, it's fiberglass free, it's non-toxic. It was as natural as I could get, and I think it's an area where I really wanted to invest the money. I didn't want to bring too many like chemicals, or I think they call them VOCs or something like that. I just didn't want to bring too many chemicals into the van, and so that was important to me to use just like a natural insulation. So that's what I did. So I wasn't planning on insulating the whole van yet, but once I put these 2x6s up, I wasn't going to have access to those sort of like crevices anymore. So I threw that insulation in there before adding the 2x6s. Also, I forgot to mention with the furring strips. So I put those 1/2-inch furring strips right into the ceiling to attach my planks to. And then I also did this for the 2x6s. Everything where I'm building out the wood frame in here, I'm using self-tapping metal screws. So they have a little drill bit built into the end of them so they can drill through metal. So I don't need to pre-drill with like a little bit. I can just use the screw themselves and the screws screw themselves in. That's what the self-tapping means. And so for the ceiling, I used, I think they were 3/4 inch. They might've been 1 inch, but I was going through 1/2-inch plywood, so make sure that you have enough thread on your screw to get through the plywood, and then grab onto the metal with a bit of meat on it still. For the 2x6s, I think I used 2-inch screws because a 2x6 is actually only 1.5 inches thick. Despite the name, it's not actually 2 inches thick. So I think I used 2-inch self-tapping screws to hold those onto the van. After I put the 2x6s, I started at the top and I was kind of working my way down. So after the 2x6s, I added more 1/2-inch furring strips, this time to sort of the upper half of the walls. Again, this was just going to be to support more lateral kind of wall pieces of plank here. So if you're not going to do the walls like I have here, you may not necessarily need to put the furring strips like I did. However, I'm also intending to use those furring strips as support for my shelves. It's going to come down to personal preference, but 1 sheet of 1/2-inch plywood I think was almost enough to do every bit of framing, so to speak, in this van. So what I did was, out of the 1/2-inch plywood, I cut lengthwise strips. I don't remember how long they had to be to run across the metal frame of the van, and then I connected those horizontal pieces to the ceiling pieces with some short vertical strips. And I had to figure out how to use what's called a Craig jig, so you can put screws, instead of going like straight through the wood, you can go at an angle and go out the side. And the Craig screws don't feel as strong as if you can get a right angle into the wood, but they felt strong enough, and those mixed with some Gorilla wood glue have held up plenty fine for me thus far. They don't feel loose or anything, so I'm not too concerned about their strength as long as you get the Craig jig screwed in there appropriately. For the last part of the framing I did in this video, I built sort of a little 90-degree piece out of plywood that you guys can see me bolting in here. The purpose of this was to have somewhere for my bed wall to line up with. So if you can see, let me move my pillows. Ugh. You can see back here. If you can see back here, it goes into this piece of wood right here just to create a solid foundation. Otherwise, this wood would kind of slide around back there. So this is one of those things I did where going back, I probably didn't really need to do it, and I probably in hindsight wouldn't do it again. So if you just wanted to add a vertical furring strip here and then leave the little 90-degree part out of it, that would be fine too. And then from my wall, I could have just extended the wood that I had in here a little bit. But if you want to run more planks like this across there, I would recommend having the 90s so they could line up nicely and have like a nice kind of sort of finished trim, so to speak, there. All right, guys, well, that's going to conclude it for part 1 of this sort of van build series. Let me know what you think. If you learned anything, if you have questions or concerns, if you just want to tell me how wrong I did this thing. This is my first van, so I'm learning along the way. I've made a couple mistakes that I'm aware of already, and I'm sure I've probably made a whole lot more mistakes that I have yet to realize. So if you guys have any tips or suggestions or maybe good resources for me to learn from, I would really appreciate that. If you want to see something different in the next video, let me know. All right, guys, well, that's all I got for you. So be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.